Hello, everyone, and welcome to K6 Office Hours. Today it's just me and Simme. I am Nicole van der Hoeven.
And I'm Simon Aronsson, and not Nicole van der Hoeven, as usual.
And we are both developer advocates at K6. We wanted to take a breather. We've had a few awesome guests on recently. What was that, Simme?
I don't know. I'm still getting used to this camera. We'll see how many times it will take until it's actually working as it should.
It's okay. We've had a few guests on recently. They've been awesome, but we wanted to just take a breather and answer some commonly asked questions. But first, I think, Sima, you want to announce something?
Yes, as of today, there is actually a CircleCI orb available for testing with K6 as part of your CircleCI workflows. So I'm not going to go into detail on that, but I thought we could at least have a quick look on of what that means. So if I'm just to, let's see. Share my screen. All right. So as of today, we've actually published this as a 1.0 version. I'm not. It's really, really new, so there might still be bugs and things might be a little bit unstable, but uh, you can quite easily now add CircleCI or add K6 tests into your CircleCI workflow. So by using this orb K6IO/test, you'll get access to a job called test. And with that job, you'll be able to start both cloud tests and tests running on your local CI runner. So for those of you that have wanted to test in CircleCI but haven't been able to actually do that because of various reasons, you will now be able to do that quite easily. So how would you go about doing that? Well, we can have a quick look at how that would look. I'm not going to go into any details, but we can at least do a quick demo. Let's see.
I think it's so perfect too because you were the one that wrote that blog post that we have already on Circle CI, right? And now it's even simpler than the process that you outlined there.
Might have been me. I'm not sure, but it might very well have been me. uh, all right. So, say that we have a pipeline that we want to actually run our test on. Then we need to set that up first using a CircleCI config file. So, if we just were to create a directory called .circleci, and in that one we'll place a YAML file called config.yml. All right, so this is all we need to get started with configuring our actual CircleCI pipeline. And now we want to do something here as well, right? We don't just want to have an empty config, but we want to run our tests. So we'll start off by telling CircleCI that we want to use version 2.1 of the CircleCI config schema, and that we want to run things in a workflow. So we're going to define a workflow called workflow. We can name it something else. We can call it office hours workflow. And in that we can place jobs. So if we already had this set up, then we would probably have something like a checkout step, checking out our code that we're going to test, and maybe some build step. If it were, for instance, a Node.js app, then we would probably do something like npm run test, um, maybe npm run build. But then we also want to do a performance test or a load test on our project. So then we can now go ahead and add an orb to our pipeline. So we're going to set up a key called orbs. In that, we're going to add a reference to the orb that we're going to use. In this case, we're going to call it K6IO, and the URL or the orb name of it is K6IO/test, and then we need to specify the version as well, so 1.0.0. Then we'll just go ahead and use that in our test. So we'll write K6IO/test, which is also the name of the job that we'll be running. And we'll be able to configure that using the predefined keys that we have available in the orb. You can see all of them on the CircleCI developer orb hub, I guess. But we could, for instance, use the key arguments and add whatever argument we would pass to the command line in a regular test that we run locally. So for instance, if we want to output our results or our metrics as a JSON, then we can actually add -o JSON, just as we would locally. And we can specify what script we want to run. So for instance, if we want to run main.js, then we can type that in. And that's about it. There are a lot of more options, but these two lines, defining the orb in your pipeline, as well as using the job as part of one of your workflow, that's really all you have to do to get started with K6 in CircleCI, which is, if I dare to say so, a lot more convenient than the previous way of doing this, where you had to set everything up and install K6 and things like that yourself. So that was basically what I was going to show.
Awesome. We actually have Julie in the chat saying that she is using CircleCI, but they had some trouble getting the script working. So this might have come just in time to help them out.
All right. So K6 run --env, my var name equals green. And you're not getting the envars to work there. Okay. So my first question to Julie then is this how you... is it working if you do it locally, or do you have the same problem locally as you do in CircleCI? Because that's usually a good way to get started. Check whether it works locally with the exact same command. And if that works, well, then it's probably something that we need to have a look at. But if it doesn't work locally either, then we know that the error is probably within the script, right? And that we need to check the script for errors. Okay, so you're actually using it locally. Good. Do you want to show how to use this, or should I show? Or what would you prefer? Yep. Then I'll share my screen again. All right, so back in Visual Studio Code.
I love how you're like fearless about coding live. I'm still shy about that. There's so many things can go wrong.
Yeah, well, if it goes wrong, everyone knows that I'm doing it on the fly, right? So it's okay. So let's just export a default function, just as we usually do when we write a test, and we're just gonna log something. Hello world. Okay, so now if I run this, it should just output hello world, right? It also did.
Oh, maybe we should hide her comment just so we can see your...
There. Oh.
Oops, I think we both did it.
Yep, you go ahead.
Okay.
All right, so I entered hello world in my default function and ran it, and here it is. So now let's have a look at the K6 help. If we check the help, and maybe we should even check the help for run, then we can see that we can use either --env or we can use -e to add environment variables, right? And that's exactly what Julie tries to do. So if we were to add e, or let's do n, since that's what Julie did, and we'll add like a target equals Nicole. Don't worry, it's not as bad as it sounds. And then in our actual function, we're going to go ahead and change world to actually utilize the env target. And now if we run this again, it prints hello, Nicole. So I'm curious as to how you're actually utilizing or how you're trying to consume these environment variables in your test script, because accessing them through underscore underscore env dot and whatever the name of your property or your environment variable is should be sufficient to actually have them propagate from your terminal and into the test. Okay, so sorry, Julie, but unfortunately, YouTube seems to strip away any comments that include links to external pages. I guess it's because um, there is a high risk of people luring you into shady web pages if they were to allow it. So, uh, if you want me to have a look at your SO, then please send me the URL either on the Casey's community Slack or on the forums, and I'll be happy to take a look.
If she said that she's using it within a URL, if you're using it there, because here Simme wasn't using it within the single quotes. So if you're gonna do that, then you need to do like a $sign and then bracket. Oh, maybe Simme you can show.
Yes, I'm just gonna try to find our HTTP bin. Do you remember the URL to that, Nicole? Because apparently I don't.
HTTP bin.
Yes. We can use httpbin.org, I guess, or com or whatever is the URL. Okay. Right. So if we, for instance, have a URL that will set to httpbin.org, let's say we're going to use the anything path, because with that one we can add whatever we want to the URL, and it will just echo back whatever we pass in as request data in the response. So it's really good for trying things like this out. So let's now import the HTTP client as well, because we're going to need that as well.
Oh, cool. She actually posted it in Slack.
Ah. Let me have a look. All right. Yeah, that's basically what we're doing as well. Is none of your it's one environment variable. Okay. So you're reading it from a JSON. Okay.
Don't we need to do $sign brackets underscore underscore env and then the environment variable?
Yes, you would have to do that. Let's just paste in her function and use that as our example instead. And then we'll http:/anything/ and then we're going to use whatever data was in the my_env variable. Because what Julie is doing here is that she's using the my_env, the result of that, and interpolating that in the string, which is totally fine. And the actual underscore underscore env that you were talking about, Nicole, it's used here. So she's actually using that to pick what file to read the content from.
Ah, okay, I see. She's doing it in JSON. All right.
So let's create a JSON file. We call that urls.json. And in that we have, because it's JSON, right? So I think I see why this is not working, but we will have a check and see whether that is correct or not. So I have an array of URLs here, and the first one will be foo equals bar, and the second one will be user equals Nicole, and the third one will be target equals Simme. Okay. So we have three different options here. And now what will happen is, or what we expect to happen is that when we launch the test, it's gonna look for whatever we specify as my config file, and it will parse that JSON into my env. And since this is JSON, it won't be a single value, but rather it will be some kind of object in here. So we need to actually navigate that object until we find the key that we're looking for. In this case, I'm going to use user equals Nicole. So then we'll have to take the index 1 of this object to actually get that. Because it's at position 0, 1. Right? Then let's just log this out to start with. So now if I add an environment variable called my config file and set that to urls.json, and then run the test.js. Then you can see that we actually get user equals Nicole as part of that URL. So what I'm thinking is that the configuration file that you're pointing at, Julie, is probably containing something more than just the URL that you want to use. Probably it's nested in some way, likely in an object. So say, for instance, that your object would look something like this.
Julie is saying she'd rather get it working first without any JSON file.
Okay, no JSON file. All right. Yeah, if you're not going to use the JSON file, then it should likely work, or it should work if you're just using /env equal whatever key you have equals URL whatever value you want. Because now I'm running the exact function that you pasted. I just modified this part with another URL. Other than that, it's the exact same function as you pasted on Slack. If anything, I'm unsure what version of K6 you're using. I don't know if there might have been a bug at some prior version, but the most recent one is 0.31.0. So that's the one you should be using to have something that's working the same way as whatever I'm even using 29, so it should work. It should work with 29 as well, I guess.
I haven't updated.
Okay.
She's on 30. Yes, there will be Sholban. Sholban? I think that's. Sorry. This will just turn into a video recording. I think that Sholpan Jumavekisi. I'm sorry. I might be butchering your name, but
Wow,
I'm trying.
I'm so impressed, though. Let us know if Nicole got that right or how it should be
Probably
pronounced.
not.
But yes, everything is recorded, and as Nicole says, and it turns into a regular video once the stream is over, so you can always watch it in the future or past the stream. Okay, so now I have K6 31.1 even. All right, so let's try to run the exact same command again. Okay, so let's try to just echo whatever was the environment variable, because I actually changed how the JSON looks. And since we're not using that for now anyway, let's just do like this instead. And then it echoes urls.json. So that seems to be working as well. I think the reason you got that, Julie, is because in the example that you pasted, you are using the JSON file. And in that case, you would have to add a selector at the end as well. So for instance, I'm gonna quickly fix this. Yeah, but if I ignore the JSON and actually just log the envart, you could try this as well. Just the exact command that I'm using here, or the exact function. Then I think you'll actually be able to see that you get the value you provide echoed out in the K6 run. I'm going to go ahead and paste that back to you in Slack, so you'll be able to just copy paste it and try it. Yeah, sure, go ahead. Feel free to try that as well, just to make sure whether that works or not. Meanwhile, what else can we talk about, Nicole?
Shulpan had a question. I can hear. How can you transfer files to tests without using Open File Path B? Transfer files to tests.
If I understood it correctly, and that you actually want to read the content of a file and use that throughout your test, then you can't really do that without using open. So that's how you have to do it. What you could do possibly is to assign the content of whatever file to a environment variable, I guess. So you could take that in as a string, but that's likely to be kind of brittle and error prone. So I would recommend that you actually use open. Is there a, or rather, please, if you have a use case where open does not suffice, feel free to expand a little bit on what your use case is, and we'll see whether we can accommodate that in any other way.
Yeah, I guess that is important to know. Like, why would you not want to use open? Well, I don't know if he's actually, she, sorry, is still around. If Shulpan is still around, but maybe ping us on Slack or just post something in community discussion or something, just because it's often handy for other people to see, because they might also be wondering the same thing.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so I
Also, tell
received.
me how to pronounce your name.
Apparently, you pronounced it correct.
How do you know? Did Mihail tell you?
No.
Oh,
Check
there
the
it is.
on-screen
Oh,
comment.
oops, I missed that.
Yeah.
Yay! I love the Cyrillic alphabet. It is awesome. I wish all alphabets were as phonetic.
So, okay, here we have Julie's test file, the simplest version of it, right? So, in this test file, she's using env.host to set the host for the test. So just to make this a bit easier or more contained, I'm just going to remove this part, and I will also remove your thresholds because they don't really affect whatever we're discussing now, right? And then I'll also remove this. All right, so without that, what we are doing is that we are setting a URL. We are setting a param that we send to the HTTP function along with the URL for what we want to want to add a header that tells that we accept application JSON data back as the response, and then we log out the body that we got in response. So with that said, let's change our command to run this. Instead of using my config file, we'll use host instead. And here we'll set that to http bin.org/anything. And then we pass the file name to our test. And then we run. Okay, now I actually see what the error is. When you use $sign and these squiggly brackets, then you actually have to utilize something called a template string or a backtick string. Otherwise, JS won't interpolate whatever you pass. It will try to interpret it literally rather than interpolating it. Yeah. So if we change the backticks instead, then you can also see in the syntax highlighting that it turned blue and white. And then we know we have the correct format for it to actually resolve to a variable. So now if we run it again, ta-da! So I think, Julie, that
Well, yeah,
on
that's
the
so
right track.
good.
You just need to switch the double quotes to backticks instead if you want to interpolate your environment variable into the URL.
Let us know if that works.
Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Shulpan says, we use open file path B and then we pass an array of numbers to the tests. And then, she says, but this is not very convenient since the files are large and accordingly we get huge arrays of numbers that are inconvenient to pass to the input.
Okay, this sounds like something that would be up your alley, Nicole, because this has to do, or this could be solved, or at least that's my initial thought, using the
Shared
read-only
array.
arrays, shared arrays. Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
maybe I'll link that. Shared array. I don't know if you have heard of this feature, Shulpan, because I think it was just in version 0.30, so relatively recent. But here, if you go to that link, it's basically I think that might solve your problem because one of the problems that I think that you're talking about is that there's very large files that you're using, and every time you run a test, all of those each generator has to open. Well, each file has to be transferred to every generator, which isn't really the most effective way to do it. So the shared array is a way to do that kind of dynamically. So you only the part that a user needs is transferred at runtime dynamically by K6 if you're using it as a shared array rather than like a just a normal CSV or whatever. So I think if that's what you mean by transferring files, that might be a better solution for you.
I think if I'm not mistaken, Mihail, one of the engineers or maintainers of the K6 CLI or the K6 core, actually wrote in some release or changelog that the performance difference by using shared array. Uh, Maybe you remember the exact numbers, Nicole, because I sure don't.
No.
Let's see. I have it in front of me, I think. I think it was like by changing to a shared array, each VU went from multiplying the data you use. So say for instance that you use a 2 megabyte JSON file, then every VU would have a 2 megabyte overhead to load in that data. But by using shared array, it would be insignificant, right? You would get 2 megabytes for all in total for all of your VUs, rather than per VU. So it's a lot more efficient, to say the least.
Hope that helps. Also, I'm ashamed to admit that I don't know the appropriate pronouns. I'm not sure. So I apologize if I misgendered you. Я говорю по-русски не очень хорошо. That just means I don't speak Russian very well. If you are Russian, which you might not be. Um, yeah, I'm trying to look to see if I have a sample handy for it, because that would be handy. But anyway, they have it in the documentation. I don't suppose you would have a sample, Simme?
We can probably come up with something. Just give me a sec. I need to.
Yeah.
Oh, so you're actually transferring the pictures or videos to the system under test. Is that correct?
You can use it to send binary data.
Yes, but if the array point at one binary file each, then it might still, and they are only used once. Say, for instance, that one VU uses each item, then it might not be as a significant resource decrease as it would if the data is reused between iterations, I guess.
Well, let us know if that works.
All right, so should we have a look at shared arrays as well?
If you feel like quickly creating something, sure.
Sure. It might not work on the first try, but
Okay.
we'll get there. So back to VS Code. Let's say now that we have some kind of data variable. Let's just name it data, and that's
Oh,
a
Mihail is saying, sorry to interrupt, but I thought it worked with binary data, but Mihail, one of our devs here, is saying that it doesn't.
all right. But now that we are on the topic, I'll still show an example of how this works, because maybe it will help someone else that needs to do something similar. So we've imported the shared array object from k6/data, and then we've created a constant called data that will be an instance of the shared array class. We're going to name that something. So let's call that demo data. And then as the callback function for that, we're going to go ahead and generate some data. In this case, we could use, for instance, open or open to read content from a file, but for this demo, let's just go ahead and create the data ourselves. And then once we've done that, we can just return that as the return value from this function. So I'm just going to create an array and return that directly. And in this one, we're going to have, say, hello world, hello Nicole,
Say something
hello
Swedish.
Fubar, hey på dig, hello Van der Hoeven, since I can actually spell that
Spell
now.
it.
So we have an array with 5 different items. And then in our default function, we can actually access that as if it were just a regular array, but the data won't be duplicated for each VU, but rather just used for one specific V, or rather used for all VUs. So if I were to do, for instance, console log data iterations, iter, I think it is, right? Iter. Then if we set this up to actually run for 5 iterations, hope this is 0 index now, otherwise we will get a race condition, but or not a race condition, but a index out of bounds exception. But anyhow, I'm rambling. Now let's run this and see what it prints. All right, then it prints all the values. And as you can see, that was really, really fast. Sure, this was not a lot of that data, but at the same time, it was only allocated once and made available um, using pointers rather than copying the value to your actual VU. So it is a very significant performance improvement over the old way of loading data into your tests. But since you're using binary data, it might not work, or it will not work because of reasons, as Mihail so elaborately explained it. But yeah, so this is how you could use shared array to share data between different VUs. And one thing to keep in mind with this is that it is a read-only array, so you can only create the data of this array as part of the callback function, and then the data will be locked for the entire test. Yeah.
I wonder if she's already using like an array buffer to, because I know that there were issues with that before. Maybe Mihail can chime in and talk about the issues that were raised that I think are fixed with the recent changes. This might be something where maybe we can talk on Slack or something, to see exactly what you're trying to do.
Definitely.
Okay. Shall we? What were we going to talk about? This
uh,
is good, though. This is good to get
yeah,
questions.
definitely. And Julie, if you manage to get your test working, please
Yes.
let us know in the chat as well. Um, I'm keeping my fingers crossed. Uh, yeah, what were we going to talk about? We were supposed to say that next week we're not gonna have a live stream
Yes.
due to the Easter holidays. Uh, yeah, so next week won't be any live stream, but the week after that we're likely to be back as usual.
And also, I just found out that this. Oh, good. Julie says it's working. Yay.
That's great to
So
hear.
it was just using the template string.
And
Okay.
those errors are so hard to spot, right? And it's kind of like the thing you and I did earlier today, where we went about for a couple of hours trying to spot an error in a configuration file, and then it turned out we had already fixed it, just not uploaded the right file, so or the right version of the
Yeah.
file. So we were chasing shadows for a good 2 hours before we
I think it might
realized.
have been more than that because that was yesterday. All we had to do was apply that manifest file. Great. And we changed so much after that. But anyway, it's done. It's working.
Yep.
Um, all right. So
Uh,
I wanted to talk about the time zone difference because I just found out that on Sunday, I think we're both going on daylight savings, right? I think Sweden is in it as well.
Yeah.
So that might be different. We might be streaming at a different time when we come back. I think it's just easier for you to look up what time it is, but we'll be streaming at 5 p.m. Central European time.
And that's good to know as well that these hours and these weekdays, they're not a set in stone, right? We just picked something that YouTube suggested would be best for our users. But if you would prefer any other weekday or another time of day, please let us know in some way, either through Slack or the community forums or in the chat, and we'd be happy to reevaluate this choice. Because we want it to be convenient for you to actually attend and to be part of the stream, because it's with you that we're creating this, right? It's not just me and Nicole talking to each other, because we do that all day. So if you want to be part of this and the time doesn't really work for you, let us know.
Yeah. So another thing that I wanted to raise is something that I hear a lot from new users to K6, and I felt the same way. I think coming from a lot of other test tools, I was expecting like I struggled to understand what was actually happening. So I thought one thing that we can do is go through the end of test summary report and kind of talk about what all of that means. I will share my screen. Okay.
I could use that
Yeah, I
as
can
well.
take it
So
there.
looking forward to it.
Okay. So when you first run K6 here, this is what you see. And maybe I'll show that this is just a basic script that I used for the Ministry of Testing meetup. It's a pretty simple one. But it also has some text verifications. There are three functions, and it just has text verifications. So once I run it, I would first look at the how many VUs were run. So in this script, I just commented this out. So by default, it's just going to run one virtual user. Uh, and so that's why it's saying here that it's just one virtual user. And then it because it's just one iteration as well, it just kind of takes as long as it takes. It doesn't take this 10-minute period here. So I'm always interested in the checks first, because even if you don't have those checks, then you might not be getting the right page. Sometimes error pages return HTTP 200s as well, which can be really confusing. So I always try to have something that an error page would not return. And then there are a lot of metrics here, and I'd say that most of the time, if you're just looking for the response time, it's probably just this that you're looking at. So HTTP rec duration includes, maybe I'll post the metrics. There's a lot, right? But normally, when people say response time, this is what they're looking at. So the HTTP rec duration has the average, minimum, median, maximum. This is the 90th percentile response time and the 95th percentile response time. But this is for all requests, even the ones that failed. So sometimes that's useful to know, but just in case you only wanted to get the response time of transact I should say requests that have passed, you can look at this line now. This is new in the was it just the last release, Simme?
Yeah, it was new in
031, I
31.
think.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so
Question.
yes.
Uh, if you're not familiar with the term percentile and what the 90th percentile or 95th percentile means, would you mind explaining what that actually means? What are we getting by looking at that value? Why is that important?
So that just means that 90, so if you have a 90th percentile of 1 second, that means that 90% of the requests had a response time of 1 second or less. So sometimes people use average, but the problem with average is that it's not really, it doesn't describe the distribution. It's just if you have 10 different ones and let's say 9 of them have 1 second response time, but then one of them has a 10-second response time, that one outlier is going to significantly skew the average. So
Mm.
things like the 90th percent and the percentile response times, or like standard deviations, all of these metrics are just trying to describe the distribution, and it also is more resilient to having a lot of these metrics, is more resilient to outliers.
All right, so it basically makes sure that the tail of laggards is way less than it would have, so outliers don't skew your results. Okay, nice.
One
We
thing
have a
that I was,
question.
oh,
Yes,
sorry.
go ahead. No, go ahead. You first.
I was just going to say one thing that I was confused about that I want to point out in case others are confused too is this for here. It's it's a little counterintuitive. This actually means that four of the requests did not fail.
Yeah,
So,
you can think of it as as the cross and the check as, did it match the filter HTTP rec failed?
yeah.
Yes or no?
Okay, Julie says, how does it get the 90th and 95th percentile time when you only run once with one VU? Okay, so that the response time here is all of these ones are based on all of the requests, and even though there was only one virtual user and there was one iteration, I still had 4 requests in the script. So, sorry, it's a little big, so I'm scrolling too quickly. But you can also check that here in HTTP recs. So there were 4 of them. So one iteration of all of the four. So it's not the same one 4 times. It's 4 different ones once. If that makes sense. One question for you, Simme. What do you think, what would you choose as the response time, I guess?
Uh, I would choose P90 or P95 of HTTP rec duration. Because then I know that the tail will not be that long, and that most of the requests of my actual test fit within the boundary that I've set up.
Yeah. I definitely like the percentiles as well. I think there's a case to be made that it's not just HTTP rec duration, because you could also, for instance, include HTTP rec connecting, which let me read the official definition of it, because I think it depends. It kind of depends what you're looking for, right?
Mhm. Yeah, because the HTTP rec duration uh, is actually a aggregate of a couple of the other metrics, right? So
Yeah. Well, so is HTTP rec duration, though.
yeah, sorry, that was the one I meant.
Oh,
HTTP
oh,
rec duration is an aggregate of a couple of
yeah.
other metrics.
So it is sending, receiving, and waiting.
Yeah.
But like this HTTP rec TLS handshaking and connecting, I mean, there's some cases where you might want to know that too. For instance, the connecting is time spent establishing TCP connection to the remote host. So that's
Mhm.
something that would be happening in a user's browser too. So I would argue that if you want the response time to be a bit more realistic, then maybe you would want to add that in. But I think for in most cases, the HTTP redirection would be sufficient. One user, one request. Well, we can actually try that. So I've got it set up a bit differently. Each function is a different. I call it like a transaction or an action, right? So let's just comment these ones out. So then it's only going to go home, and it will only do the one request, which is just to the domain, which is
What I
this
would expect would happen here is that it would show the same values across the
for
board, right?
everything. Yeah. Oops.
Let's see if I if I'm
That's what
correct.
I think too. It should all be the same. Yep.
So it's
Yep.
not actually extrapolating anything, or it's not trying to guess or uh, assume what it would have been if it were run multiple times. It would just use whatever samples it has. In this case, one. So the
Yeah.
P95 of one is one. So that will be the the one that will be used for that metric.
Yeah. So the idea is that if, so in the example earlier, if there were 10 and nine of them had a response time of 1 second, but the 10th request had a response time of 10 seconds, then the 90th percentile would be 1 second.
Yeah. Julie says that she doesn't think that it was all the same for her, and in that case, I'd be very, if you manage to recreate that, I'd be very happy to get that report or get a copy of that, because that would be really interesting to look at, because then I think we have a bug that we really need to get solved.
Also, just make sure that you do just have one request here
Yeah, and with
in
one
HTTP
request,
Rex.
we don't mean one iteration, right? We mean
Yeah.
one actual HTTP call in that iteration.
Jivananthan Kesavan. Um, does K6 test script not support optional chaining? I get syntax errors. Just posting again for an answer. Do you know what he means by chaining, Simme?
Hmm. Uh, no, it does not. It does not support optional chaining. So optional chaining is when you, in some languages it's called safe navigation, or it could be called other things as well. But that's not included in K6. I think that's not even part of all browsers yet. Uh, so it's kind of a null coalesce, right? So if you, for instance, say that you have an object called animals, and in that animals array, let's say, you have a lot of different animals, and you want to look at the first one, and you want to look at the name of that, which might be dog, uh, or in some cases there might not be. It's probably easier if I show, right? Because now I'm just rambling again. So, say for instance that you had an object like that looked like this: um food, ice cream. That's a food, right? At least I think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the flavor, it has a flavor which is um, pear.
Not vanilla. Okay.
Uh, and that is our food one. But we also have a food two. And there we have no flavor, but we have a topping, which is chocolate, which makes no sense. But in this example, just ride with it. We have an ice cream without a flavor that has a
Maybe
topping.
chocolate sprinkles.
So it's just a bucket of chocolate sprinkles, basically. Um, so these are both part of an array that we call food. Food one and food two. And in this case, what we would want to do, uh, or what the optional chaining would allow us to do is to, for instance, say that for each food item that we have, we want to log the uh, ice cream flavor. And then, since we know that this value could be null on some of the, um, or rather, this is actually not true. So let me change this a bit. So this is not an ice cream, but a soup. And the flavor of this will be corn. It's a corn soup. So in that case, say that we still want to check the ice creams for their flavor. Then we will get a null reference exception here, because this object does not have the key ice cream, but has the key soup instead. So what we could do then is say that we want to do an optional chaining here using the question mark. And in that case, instead of breaking, as it would if we just do it like this, we'd get undefined back. So we'd actually get a value or lack of value, but it would not break. So that's why you would use optional chaining.
Okay.
But K6 does not support that. No, sorry. So what you would have to do in K6 is rather to do some kind of ternary condition, right? So you could do, for instance, if there is a item ice cream, then we want to get the flavor. Otherwise, we want to return null or something else even.
Could you do
So
try catch as well?
you could do that, but since this isn't really an exception, but something that we know will happen, or occasionally, uh, we probably don't want it to error out, right? We want it to continue the normal flow and not interrupt the flow. So then we should probably substitute it instead. What we could do, however, is to say that, for instance, if item ice cream, then we do this. So we know that the ice cream key is present on the item. But optional chaining, no, it's not available yet. It will probably be at some point. At least I'll try to convince Mihail that we need to add it to Goja at some point. But currently, it's not part of K6. Sorry. So a long answer that
To
basically
say
ended
no.
up in no, but it's hopefully useful for someone. Now you know what it is and what it's used for.
Okay. I don't know what Leandro was saying. Cajeta.
What does that mean?
I don't know. Caja means box. Cajeta, like small box.
Yeah, no, cajeta is like uh, chocolate cream or something. I
Oh,
think
oh.
it's used for. Uh, don't you eat cajeta with like churros, for instance? I think.
Ooh. Yeah, I'd eat caramel with
Hmm?
churros. Um, yeah, okay. Ooh, even a cash nose. Okay, maybe I'm just like out of it.
Goat milk caramel spread, apparently.
Burnt milk. Ooh, that sounds
In,
really good.
inside of churros. Oh, I haven't. I think I've never had filled churros. Only ones that I've dipped in something.
So, Sima, next time, what I want to do that we didn't quite get to is I want to show um, how to pipe out results in like raw results in CSV from K6 and then consume that with the visualization tool. I specifically use Tableau because it's just my favorite. But maybe we could do Grafana as well.
Yeah, that would be really interesting. Let's do that next office hours. So if you have any suggestions for that, maybe you've set up set up a cool visualization of your own and would like to share that to the community or at least show it off, then hit us up on Slack and we'll make sure to invite you to the stream, or you'll be able to at least send us a screenshot and we'll show that.
Did you see we could do that cool automatically generated report summary HTML report that someone made recently? I
Yes,
haven't
I
gotten a
think
chance to try that out.
that was by oh, what's his name? He's kind of a longtime K6 user. Um,
Is it Ben?
Ben Coleman, right? Or something like that.
Yeah. Anyway, maybe that's something that we can do next time, because I think that I would like to spend a little more time talking about results and debugging. And I know you have ideas on organizing K6 code. So I think that would be good to do for next time. But not next week, because we will be off on holiday and hopefully you are too. So, was there anything else that you wanted to say this time, Simon?
I don't think so. Let's just repeat for the ones that maybe joined late or anything. That one, we're gonna be off for next week, but we will be back the next week after that. Two, we're gonna, or we've only chosen this time slot because YouTube suggested it to us. So if you have any other suggestion that would suit you better, and we get a lot of different suggestions for moving the stream, then we'll definitely consider moving it. So if you prefer to have it sometime else, some other day, maybe even, let us know and we'll see what we can do with that. But of course, we won't change for any suggestions. So enough people have to suggest the same spot for us to actually move it. But feel free. Um, Anything else?
If you have any questions that you'd like us to talk about or to answer live for you, feel free to use well, actually, you can just put it in a comment to any of our videos. We'll see those. Or even in the Slack channel, in the Slack account for K6. Sim and I are both on there, and we will find it if you ping us, especially. It's also really good to just have that in advance so that we can have a better answer for you.
Yep. And since exactly 1 second ago, we also have a Slack channel called Office Hours. So if you
Oh,
want to get
that's
in touch with
awesome.
us, you can write in the Office Hours Slack channel, and we'll make
Nice. I'm
sure to
not part
reply
of it
to
yet.
it. It's so fresh, not even Nicole is a member yet.
Yeah.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, and that was it, right?
Yes. Thank you. And have a good weekend, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.